to Malcolm X. Because he was basically a person who believed in by any means necessary. And he is most famous for what is clearly an act of armed struggle in New Mexico back in 1968. That was when a bunch of about 17 people in his group, the Alliance of the Free People's Townships, basically kidnapped the sheriff of Tia Amarilla County. They shot a state deputy and beat up a patrolman, and then went up into the mountains and hid. And the fact that he did that and survived was totally mind-blowing to people, a lot of the poor people in New Mexico. And it got very much in the papers on the West Coast, but not too much in the East Coast. So the first time I met Tijerina was in New York City, in a hotel, as a kind of a movement conference. They were having many of the day. And here's Tijerina with a little man who's about 4 feet, 5 inches tall, who Tijerina says is the mayor of Tia Amarilla. And he talks about the history of northern New Mexico, like it's a separate country. And he talks about how they're trying to liberate it through the land grant movement. Now, I don't know if anybody has read some of the obituaries of Tijerina. I was reading a few today online. And they talk about the land grant movement. But what is interesting is nobody talks about, there's no mention in any of the articles where these land grants came from. And it's important to understand that Tijerina and the people of northern New Mexico got their land grants from the King of Spain. And it goes back to before the United States even existed or even was thought about. And so these folks didn't even think of themselves as Mexicans in many ways. They were basically Hispanos, not Hispanics, Hispanos who related to the King of Spain. And that was their direction. And they were mostly poor, mostly farmers, and the Anglos had come and taken most of their land. And so part of defending these people and their land rights was also talk about that they had prior rights going back to the King of Spain. And that became the basis of a lot of the Chicano movement in that part of the country. He became very well known. He was one of the top major leaders of the Chicano movement, along with Cesar Chavez, along with Jorge Gonzalez, and the brother, I'm having a middle mind thing here, who started the La Raza Unida? Yeah, Gutierrez, Juan Miguel Gutierrez. Those were the kind of the four, they were called the four horsemen of the leaders of the Chicano movement of the 60s and late, starting around 65, 65, and of course Cesar Chavez was the other one. Notice they're all men. And although in many cases they had women behind them, but they were trying to put forward a very militant image. Tijerina was probably the most militant in terms of his rhetoric. He was a fiery speaker. He was also a man of God and kind of a mysticism of God, but he believed a lot in that somehow the God of liberation was the God of justice, and that he spent most of his life going back and forth between, he was born in Texas, and he went to Mexico as a young man, came back to Arizona, then decided that Arizona was not where he wanted to be, and he then went to Albuquerque. Later on, I would go down to his office and meet him in his office, and he had this huge table, and he called it La Mesa Cosmica, the cosmic table. And each corner represented one of the races. One was brown, one was black, one was yellow, and one was white. And he said that the duty of the revolution was to bring all these different groups together. And he was basically holding down the part for the Mexicanos and Chicano movement. And he very much, we talk here at the east side about third world unity. He was very much into that. And so he actually had met with Elijah Muhammad. He would later meet with Martin Luther King. And King would invite him to be part of the Poor People's Crusade, which he accepted. King, by this time, which was 1968, had been assassinated, but the Poor People's Crusade continued in Washington. And Tijerina was the leader of the Latino contingent that went to Washington and stayed there. My other little escapade with Tijerina, as Greg was talking about, is that in New Mexico itself. We went out, a bunch of us, 3 people from SNCC, and thank you, Emery, for saying a few nice words about what we did down in the South, in Lowndes County, to see what actually was happening, because most of us were from the New York area, the Midwest, and the idea of revolution in the Southwest, and a mayor who was 4 feet 5 inches tall, and I mean, we just couldn't get our heads wrapped around this. So we actually had to go see it. So we actually went out there, flew into Albuquerque, took a 4-wheel drive truck up north to Tia Maria, and what was really interesting, we saw all these old people, and most of them had never seen black people, had never seen black people. A few of them who were a little richer and had TVs had seen blacks on TV. Particularly, remember, this was the time of the urban rebellions, and so they knew these dark-skinned people were very militant and were burning down cities, and maybe they would have burned down some stuff as well in New Mexico. But they kept coming up, and the two brothers I was with were much darker than I am. One was from LA, Brother Ron Wilkins, who's been here, I think, to talk about the Black Mexico Project the last couple of years, and a brother named Sam Petty from St. Louis, from a group called the Black Liberators, and a good friend of Rat Brown. People would walk up to them and just kind of touch them and see, is this going to come off? Can I touch your, and your hair? We were all wearing froze back in those days. So the froze, they're so woolly and all that. Boy, this is nice. But we were up there the day that there was a big demonstration. The people who are basically the police are the forest rangers. They're like the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in Canada. They're like the Texas Rangers in Texas. And all these groups, you know, if you're white or grew up in a kind of Anglo-dominated world, which some of us did, we think these are nice guys. And you have to actually spend some time. I remember spending time with Indians up in Canada, because they tried to have solidarity with as many groups as possible, and the third world groups who were in struggle. And, you know, we saw these Indians getting their ass kicked by Royal Canadian, these nice Royal Canadian Mounted Police guys. And you can identify right away, because you said, this is what, grow up in New York, or DC, or parts of Chocolate City, we know what the police do. And so it was helped make the alliance real, because we can see the solidarity was coming out of shared struggle, given the same kind of oppression. And so anyway, Tijerina's wife, Tijerina was under court order not to do too much. So his wife actually lit fire to a forest ranger station. And then the rangers came in with guns, and we all got the hell out of there. And I was in a car with 4 people, but with the 3 people from SNCC and 1 person. People know Elizabeth Betita Martinez? Yeah. Well, we were with her, at that time, her 16-year-old daughter. And so it was the 3 of us, and she was in the car. We had guns, because I mean, it's normal to have guns in New Mexico. And so we were just going, trying to get away from there and back to some larger place, you know, like Santa Fe. And all of a sudden we saw 1 squad car behind us. So we said, better not go too fast, better slow down a little bit so they can't stop us for speeding. Then the next thing there was 2 squad cars, then 3, then 4, then 5 and 6. And it reminded me of some of those cowboy movies I had seen as a kid, you know, you're up out in the wilds and the hills, and you see canyons and all the cowboys and the Indians, and all of a sudden we're being chased by these cops. Later, what they heard, Tijerina had gotten arrested himself, and he was in a squad car. And when we got back to Albuquerque, several days later, he told us on the police radio that he was hearing that there were these bunch of folks from California and other places, these thick people, these black power people, who had vowed not to be taken alive. which was an open invitation for us to kill us. And so eventually they stopped us, had us get out in the hot sun. We were basically on our knees like this, with our hands like this behind our heads for about an hour in the hot sun before they put us to arrest us. And when we got back to Albuquerque, which I was in jail for about 2 days in a little town called Hernando in northern New Mexico. I got bailed out. That's a whole different story. Interesting, but some white woman came down from southern Colorado. And there's a real history between the ties between southern Colorado and northern New Mexico. And historically a big Chicano community. And this was a woman who, her name was Patsy Bell, who had written some articles on the growing Chicano movement, the land grant movement. And I didn't know who the hell she was. When I said some white person's coming to bail you out, I said, oh shit, is that good or bad? So it turned out to be good, and I'm here to, as a vindication of that. But she had been in the Communist Party, and the Communist Party had gone underground, because this from the 50s and early 60s, from the whole McCarthy period. But they were beginning to surface because they were a real grassroots movement, in this case the Chicano movement. And Tijerina was leading this, and they wanted to show some support. So when they heard about us getting arrested, particularly the black activists who they figured had very little support in New Mexico, they came down and bailed us out. So when we got back to sitting around the great Mesa Cosmica in Albuquerque and with Tijerina, we were talking about our adventures, and he said, this is just the first step. We're going to have many, many more, and we're really glad to be with you black brothers in the struggle. And so that's the story. And so I would just end by saying, que viva la raza! Yeah.